right, everybody. I'm happy you're back in the room and all settled. We've got Simon Jones here, the VP for Global Products for Prism ID. He has 20 plus years experience delivering product strategies as well as product positioning. He's an expert in medical device labeling, researching, and discussing medical device industry challenges. Today, he's joining us and going to be talking about the key attributes driving a robust software suite for medical electronics manufacturing. So please welcome Simon to the stage.
Thank you very much. I would love to know who wrote that intro because that sounds really good. It is me? I'll just check it is me. Hi, so I work for Prism ID. We are a software technology company. We specialize in software, just to set the scene. We specialize in creating software, providing software that allows medical device manufacturers and pharmaceutical companies to design and manage and print and output labels and artwork packaging. That's what we specialize in. The reason for coming along today was, well, EU MDR. It seems to have been quite a hot topic over the last couple of years, and it's increasing in its discussions that we're having and we're seeing from our customer base. I wanted to come along and I'm not a regulatory expert. I'll put my hands up for, actually good question. Can I ask a show of hands for those people in the regulatory or compliance teams in your organizations? Great. Can you keep those hands up if you're willing to answer the hard questions I get at the end? I'm not a regulatory expert, but what I am going to cover today in the next 20 minutes or so is the questions we've been asked by our customers and our prospects, what we think the differences are for those sticky labels, what we've seen our customers learn from the UDI implementation a couple of years ago, and also the kind of things that our customers and our companies we work with are going through in trying to become compliant with EU MDR in terms of labeling. Now, when I say labeling, I mean sticky labels, but I also mean IFUs and also e-labels and e-IFUs and direct marking on devices. So I'm trying to put a bit of practice around the theory and around the regulations. The agenda I was going to go through, well, I'll show some pictures of some labels before and after. I'll go through some of the lessons that we've seen people learn when they've put in UDI, or let's say the mistakes they meant putting in UDI, and the lessons they're hopefully learning for EU MDR. And also, I've got a short clip of some software with a bit of a demonstrating how our software can help become compliant, help you ensure you can become compliant with EU MDR. The reason for doing this, and I'm not a software expert, I'm not great at demos, I'm not running the demo, but the last few times we've given this presentation, the audience has said, great, you've talked about the problems of EU MDR for labeling, you've talked about how we should be doing it, but can you just show us what the technology does look like that actually helps us make sure we can meet the regulations? So that's why we've got a 30-40 second demo of the software running at the end. Right, we'll get stuck in. So a picture of a medical device label. I'll just step through the kind of changes that we've seen the EU MDR regulations mean on the labels. First off, UDI. So EU MDR does pick up where the FDA got to with UDI, and they've kind of extended it a bit further. Your label is reflecting a lot more of your product data, your serial numbers, your lot numbers. This is all now becoming really quite critical and really quite important. Here you've got a picture of a 2D barcode. What we've seen is a lot of organizations with UDI starting to shift from 1D barcodes to 2D barcodes. And I think actually with EU MDR, we're going to see a lot more of that. Why? Well, the benefit of 2D barcodes are, there's a couple of benefits. You can fit a lot more data on there. So actually it is helping you in terms of your manufacturing process. Secondly, it can be a lot smaller. It can take up a lot less space on the label. And actually, that means that often it's less likely to be damaged. One thing I think we've seen from organizations adopting 2D barcodes with UDI is you've got to really make sure that your output, your printing of 2D barcodes is sound, so your quality is there, so it is a good 2D barcode. So barcode quality has become a lot more important, but actually the jump to 2D barcodes, we've seen a lot of organizations really benefit. European community representative, so you do now need to have your EC rep name and address on the sticky label on the product. Electronic instructions for use, another good thing. EU MDR does support and encourage you to actually move to electronic IFUs. So actually you only need to provide one copy of an IFU, and you can provide access to IFUs for your customers if your customers are happy with that. If your users and customers are happy with it, you don't need to provide a hard printed copy of an IFU in every product. So the symbol there, you've got to put a symbol on there saying that electronic IFUs are available and a web address of where they can get at or where they can get more information on. So that's a good step forward. Yeah, good point, good point. And I think this is, you're clearly knowledgeable of EU MDR. There's still areas of interpretation around EU MDR, and certainly a lot of your peers in the EU are kind of saying to us, well, there's a lot of clarity in EU MDR, but there's still a lot of areas where they're saying, well, actually, some of the regulations do conflict with each other or they contrast with each other. Warnings. So down to medical device manufacturers, which information you see is critical, but EU MDR says important information that your customers or your users must be aware of to use a device should be on the label. Now, it is down to you to interpret what that means and what is critical information that's needed for the use of your medical device. But what we're seeing is it does see that there's got to be a lot more warning statements on the labels. And of course, being in Europe, there's also an overhead of language translations. So you do need to translate, in this case, 5 different languages. Now, we'll come on to later when we look at the impact of the overall label, but that's more information that you need to be on top of that needs to be on your label. Of course, you need the medical device symbol on there, and if relevant, the clinical investigational for use statement on there as well. So that's not a biggie. Last time I checked, I'm not sure if the medical device symbol had been agreed. No, it still hasn't been defined for that symbol. I'm not sure when that's going to happen. Your CMR, endocrine, disrupting, and blood and tissue symbols need to be on there as well, if relevant for your medical device. Again, that's good. Reprocessing, out of interest. Anyone in the room have medical devices that they recycle or reprocess? Yeah, so the EU MDR has got a lot more regulatory requirements around this. You must have the symbol on there that's saying whether your device can be reused, recycled, reprocessed, as well as saying how many times it can be recycled, reprocessed, if relevant. Now, of course, the impact of this is more than just a nice little symbol on your label. The impact is you've got to have the management systems that are tracking at a device level how many times you've recycled that or reprocessed that. Now, we've seen organizations say, do you know what? The trouble, the challenge of putting those kind of systems in place means we're just not going to bother. We're going to make our medical devices in certain categories single-use only. And that's the kind of impact MDR is having on organizations. I'm showing you little pictures of little symbols that need to be on there, but the bigger challenge for you is what it means to your systems, what it means to your data, what it means to your business processes behind the scenes. And do not worry. I'm speaking to people on a weekly basis who are saying, do you know what? EU MDR is actually that much of a challenge. we're not going to sell a certain amount of our portfolio in the EU. We're going to rationalize our portfolio. So reprocessing is important. And just symbols in general. What we think this means is it's shifting the approach to labeling as being how do we design a set of labels, one per product, that we know we can get approved, and then we know it's right, to actually being, this is so much more being driven around the product data for a particular market. Actually, the symbols you use, the data that is needed on those symbols now needs a lot more intelligence about it. We've got to be really sure that we're being compliant on each medical device, on each product, for each country. By meeting these regulations, it's now a much more data-centric decision. And I think that's kind of the critical path where UDI took it to a certain level, EU MDR, that's why it's causing people headaches. On the plus side, just to make it a bit more positive, you can now use symbols in Europe without necessarily having a text description on each. You can refer to an IFU symbols glossary to display, to explain what the symbols are. So you can save a bit of room on your label. Again, some medical devices, the real estate, the size of the label is not an issue. I've spoken to a number of medical device manufacturers today who have said, you know what, our devices are getting smaller. We got to do direct marking on the device, or we got to put stickers on the device. The size does matter. And this is what you can see. So this is kind of before EU MDR on the left, and with EU MDR, again, we've just modeled a generic label, and we're kind of showing you the label spacing difference. Now, for those of you in the regulatory team, you may go, well, there we go. At least we know what we need to put on there. You've probably got colleagues in your labeling and packaging team who are going, do you know what? This causes us a problem. This causes us a problem. This is not as easy as it looks. So this wasn't meant to be a breakdown of EU MDR regulations. I'm sure you guys know the EU MDR as well, if not better than I do. But it's trying to show that something as simple as your labeling on your packaging, it does cause challenges. So let's just now pick up on the things that we've seen in terms of the adoption of UDI and how it could relate to the adoption of EU MDR. One of the first lessons, we got about 5 lessons, one of the first things we saw with organizations who went to UDI is, do you know what? If you don't kind of get every function involved, if you don't build the right team at the start, and if you don't start early enough, this can be a bit of a problem. Show of hands again. Anybody in the room feel like they're a little bit behind on EU MDR? Anyone feel that they're well ahead of the curve on EU MDR? Anybody wish that the EU MDR timelines were like a year or 2 later? Yeah. Anyone think it's going to be shifted back a bit? I don't think so. I don't think so. Nothing I've seen or heard is suggesting that the timelines would change. So, you know, a lot of our customers, a lot of organizations we work with in terms of putting UDI in said, do you know what, we didn't put a big enough team in early enough, and we kind of made the team bigger as we went along, and that was a bit of a mistake. Another challenge is those that came late to UDI then went and spoke to software providers or system providers or consultancies to say, can we have help for you doing UDI? And scarily, the answer from a lot of them were like, yeah, but unfortunately, we've already got more customers than we can deal with. We've got more people wanting our help. And actually, you'll have to wait. So that can be a bit of a shock. And of course, as we saw with UDI, and we'll see it with EU MDR, is it does impact a lot of different functions. The label and packaging, the regulatory, the quality, the compliance teams. It does impact a lot of functions. And these are busy, busy people that you now need to pull in to say, right, what does this mean? Again, not just about labeling. You know, sticky labels have their place. But actually, this should be seen as a much broader project need across the organization. We saw with UDI that those companies that did actually think this mindset, did anticipate the pain that UDI was going to be, did actually treat it as a cross-functional task, were much more efficient in their implementation. Those people have got, those organizations got all the right people involved from the start and said, we're just going to have to get on and do this, actually went through it a lot quicker, a lot more efficiently, a lot more easily than those that said, right, how can we minimize the amount of involvement in this? How do we keep it as small as possible? Which is I guess you could say that about a lot of things. The next one, test your systems. Again, a lot of the systems you've got, a lot of the systems you use are probably far too complex and probably do much more functionality than you realize. We saw some problems with companies, with our customers who were saying, do you know what, you're now going to have a GTIN on different level of packaging for UDI. That kind of causes a problem. Just going from one GTIN to more than one GTIN per product caused a problem. And you may hear this used in your own organizations. There may be systems that you have who are considered the single source of truth. So the system that's got all the data on it and is the right data. But actually what we found was a lot of organizations were saying, well, we know all the data's there, but it really is not easy to get out. And it's really going to cost a lot of money to connect that system to a different system to a different system. And actually that's going to be a real pain. Or they actually didn't think they had systems that could help them with the challenges of the likes of UDI or EU MDR. And actually we're saying, yeah, we've got to buy all from scratch and start all from scratch. And actually, when we dug into it, we said, well, actually, a large part of the capability, the technology capability you need to do UDI, you already have. You just didn't know. No one had told you, or your IT team knew, but they hadn't told you, or you didn't realize, because the system's been in for 3 years and you didn't realize it could do this. Because admittedly, when you bought it for a particular reason, and you didn't read all of the data sheet that said everything else it did. So honestly, you can look at your systems, push your IT teams, IT reps to look at your systems and say, what actually should they be used for? What can they do? What can't they do? Data. Again, this is all about the data, to be honest. We spoke to lots of organizations with UDI, lots of customers who are going to EU MDR, and they're saying, yes, we've got a single database of product data. We've got a single source of truth for the information for our product. And then someone else in the room will go, yeah, but we know it's not really correct. You're like, what? Oh, well, yeah, we know it's got, the data's not actually right, and some of the data's over here in this system, some of the data's in that system, and actually we don't really trust that data. And you're like, really? That's quite damning. That's a bit of a worry. And you'd find the more functions that would get involved, as we talked about earlier, you'd suddenly find that they had different views as to where the correct data was held. And you're like, well, this is it's understandable. It's absolutely understandable as you buy new systems and you use them for different purposes. But actually, that can be a bit of a big challenge. And that's a problem and a headache that you need to address sooner rather than later. Also, with UDI, we saw organizations that were using the systems and adopting business processes as to where to manage UDI data where it was easiest and fastest for them to implement. Not in the correct places it should be. Not in the correct places it should be for ensuring the quality and the flexibility in going forward. So that was a bit of a challenge. And then finally, and this is probably one of the more important ones, is a lot of organizations said, right, UDI, right, we know we've got to do it, we're going to get on and do it, and then we don't need to worry about it again. And actually, we would suggest that perhaps that's not necessarily the best mindset. And actually, UDI was the first of probably many regulatory changes around the quality of the data around your product, especially where it's just shown on a sticky label, fair enough, but it's the data to do with your product. So EU MDR's come along and it's taken it further. And around the world, there's other countries who are saying, right, how do we adopt something similar, put something else in place similar to EU MDR, but perhaps be a bit tougher in the regulations and a bit more detailed. So once you've done EU MDR, it's not going to stop there. So we did see organizations who said, right, let's just do UDI and do it as a shortcut. We did see a lot of organizations that said, well, let's do a small hit team to put UDI in place, but actually let's also then build in bigger business processes and put in place the right systems to take it forward and do it properly within our organization. And those companies have benefited well. They were the same kind of organizations that said, well, let's just see UDI as an opportunity to push us into improving our current business processes and to improve the quality of data we've got in our systems around our products. So they saw UDI as a thing that kick-started it, and actually they didn't waste it as an opportunity. They said the amount of effort and time we're going to put into UDI, we'll put into improving our organizational processes and systems. And yeah, that last point, some organizations went, UDI's done, don't need to worry about that for another 10 years. And then here we are, 2-3 years later going EU MDR. What does that mean? So those are some of the lessons. Hopefully that's been of interest. That's some of the things we saw with the implementation of UDI that we're now seeing happen again with EU MDR. And actually what we're saying to organizations is, we'll just take a step back and look at the learnings and work out how you can approach EU MDR in a more holistic manner. The next aspect I was going to go on to was around some organizations we're working with are saying, we want to have this approach to only dealing with our labels once. We don't want to have to go and change our labels multiple times for EU MDR and other things that are coming around the corner. The cost of label changes, out of interest, is anybody involved in an EU MDR label change project? And if so, have you costed it up? Does a business an idea as to how much it's going to cost to become compliant with the new EU MDR regs? Don't have to give me a figure, just internally in your organizations, do you have an idea of the cost and the effort and the timescales? Kind of a feel, yeah. So some organizations we're working with, some organizations who are already using our software have said for them, there's a medium-sized medical device manufacturer who's saying $2 to $3 million. We have actually quite a large medical device, a couple of large medical device manufacturers as customers, and they're saying it's about $5 or $6 million for them. And that's not, I should hasten to add, that's not them buying our software. They've already got our software. That's just them saying this is the internal cost of actually looking at our label, looking at the EU MDR regulations, working out what it means to our products and the data around our products, and looking what it means, therefore, to the labeling and the resubmissions of our products to the EU MDR. So it's a bit of money, and again, that's their estimate, so it could be over or it could be under, learnings from UDI, but it's not cheap. And now, these are organizations that have already made the shift to having software that manages labels as a data-driven model. So good label management software will do this data-driven design or this dynamic labeling, where you don't create a label, a sticky label for every product and every package and every variant. Actually, what you do is you create a format with placeholders in there for the data you're going to pull on. So when you come to print or when you come to output EIFUs, what it's doing is it's going and grabbing the latest expiry date, grabbing the right lot number, grabbing the right batch number, grabbing the right translations of the warning statements you need to put on there. And it's then printing or outputting at that point. So you're knowing that you're using on your labels your latest approved content, rather than have labels that were printed 2 years ago and maybe out of date. So the cost can be big. But what a lot of the more forward-thinking organizations are thinking of is, well, do you know what? Actually, we've got this other challenge here that no one's really mentioned to us yet. The IT team have been a little bit quiet about, and that is Microsoft and Oracle are ending life of a lot of key operating systems. Now, the reason why that is relevant, and the reason why you may or not be aware of it, is Microsoft don't want to keep supporting software as long as possible. They want to stop support for it as quickly as possible so they can move everyone onto Windows 10 and just support the latest release. So that's where they want to get to. So over the last couple of years, they've got a bit tougher in ending support for certain old platforms. Now, there's lots of their end-of-lifing every month. The reason why I raise these are some of the common ones that a lot of your systems, your labeling systems or your data systems, may be installed on, may be implemented on, may be validated on. These are kind of the common ones that were popular a few years ago. And actually, these are the ones that are going to be end-of-lifed by Microsoft in the next 2 years. So some of our more switched-on customers are saying, well, we've got two problems here. We've got to get compliant with EU MDR, so we've got to do lots of work there. But actually, a year later, we'll then find that we have to shift off our existing systems to move on to new underlying platforms and then revalidate it. So what a lot of our customers are saying is actually we need to do the two together, or at least we need to plan to do the two together, because we don't want to incur $3 million, $4 million effort costs in moving to a certain labeling approach, certain labeling system, and then find out 12 months later that the IT team say, oh, guess what, you now got to rip out that system and put a whole new system in, and you've got to validate it on a new platform, because they feel that will be double the amount of costs. So that's kind of this strategy that we've heard the phrase of, we're going to do it once. We're going to touch our labels once. Out of interest, has anybody had their IT teams flag to them, do you know what, we need to move off this system because it's no longer supported? Or anybody got technology systems that they think are perhaps a bit too old and a bit too long in the tooth and actually need investment to move off? Yeah, so this is kind of being seen the catalyst. Not sure you can put all of the cost on EU MDR. EU MDR, quick, whole new systems everywhere. But it's worth bearing in mind that before you get too far down your EU MDR project, you just want to make sure that the systems you're planning on using don't need to change 12 months' time. Right, so this is, I want to ask, is that the time I've got left to present or the time including questions? Never mind. I should have found that out before. Again, got to plan properly. I should know what that time was for. Let me just start it off. So this isn't a software pitch. This isn't me running the demo. They won't let me in control of our software. They won't let me touch the mouses and stuff like that. Some of our audiences who have seen this presentation before, or variants on this presentation, have said, right, you talk about the problems, you've done some pretty pictures of labels, we know we've got labeling teams that are worried about labeling design, but we don't really mind. What actually does it, what is modern software meant to be doing to help with this? Here's our flagship product, and the thing I'm kind of demonstrating here is a feature we've got called regulatory rules. And so you've got your label mocked up in the middle. The stuff on the right side, don't worry about. It's actually all the variables that you drag in the right place. But the bottom left is a list of regulatory rules that you may have set up to say, right, for a particular label, for a particular product that's going to a particular country during a particular time period, we need to make sure it's got the CE mark on it, it's got the medical device, it's got the reprocessing symbol on it, it's got all those things we just talked about. So when your label designers are designing the labels, they are handheld through making sure their labels are compliant to how you've interpreted the regulations. And actually what you can see here is if some of these things aren't on there, if the right symbol isn't in the right place or the certain data isn't in the right place, so here's someone, we've just deleted a latex symbol and there's someone deleting the lot number, then on the left-hand side, the software's flagging up and saying, whoa, 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 you're missing things. You're missing a lot number that we know needs to be on this label, even if it's direct marketing or it's an EIFU, we're just, for example. And we're also missing the latex symbol. And actually what it does is it prompts the label designers or the approvers to say, look, you can't use this label as it is. In this particular case, they can just drag off that warning. They don't need to find what the right symbol is. The system tells what it is. They just drag it over from the warning, from the error, plonk it on, and there it is. It's saying, right, it all goes green now. You've got the right symbol in the right place. In this particular case, this latex symbol, it was still showing red because it was the wrong size. So you can kind of configure the software to say, if we know the symbol needs to be on there, it needs to be in a certain size or a certain place, and it's not, flag it up as an error. Don't let people approve those labels. Don't let people use those labels. So this is the kind of software that people's using to make sure that they can really ensure that their organization is designing labels that meet with your interpretation of the EU MDRs. And it's, to be honest, it's not just regulatory rules. If you wanted to use it for marketing and branding and make sure you had certain company brands or certain company logos on there, you can do. But this is the kind of thing that's allowing you to quite easily go through your many, many SKUs. Out of interest, I know there's a mixture of big companies here and a mixture of small companies here. How many of you have more than 5,000 SKUs for your medical devices? More than 10,000? Whoa. Keep going up, is it like that? Yeah, so, some of our customers have got lots of products, and this is where the challenge with the EU MDR comes from. So what I'm seeing in Europe is a lot of organizations, a lot of our customers are saying, and not just our customers, but other organizations as well are saying, do you know what, we don't know really where to start with the EU MDR. It's that kind of challenge that we're looking at our product portfolio set and saying, is this a trigger to start rationalizing? Which do we do? Do we change your products and apply to the EU again for approval for those products that we know are simplest to do, or the most important products, or the easiest ones? How do we, and everyone's taking a different approach because no one's really quite clear on the best approach to do. So just to sum up, is that including questions or not including questions? Oh, until we got a change. Well, there we go then. Good. In summary, I haven't gone into too much detail here about regulations. I apologize for those of you that wanted to, and by all means we can chat after. But really what we've seen from a very pragmatic implementation perspective is the changes for EU MDR are more considerable than they were for UDI. They are really quite considerable. And we think they do need you to take a bit more of a change in your mindset to be around, it's the product and the labeling data that we really have to worry about here. It's not just pretty sticky labels that we're worrying about, it's the labeling data here that is becoming critically important. And actually, those of you that approach it properly and really do take the time to look at your systems and look at your processes and look at the forthcoming likely regulatory changes in other countries that are following along behind the EU with the MDR will be in a better place because, as you all know, this is going to happen more. This is going to happen more regularly and faster and be more impactful. It's not going to slow down the amount of regulatory changes we have. And really, the labeling is just one area where it kind of shows it. Technology is there. I know this is a common theme with this this track is technology is there. There are tools out there that can help you do this effectively that are designed to respond to these regulatory changes, that do give you the flexibility to make sure you can meet the regulations, but you can ensure compliance and you can keep the quality in there in your products as well as your labeling. To be fair, your flash can give me times. Yeah, that's a good point. So I do have colleagues who have spent the last 2 years tracking EU MDR regulations and how people are being compliant with them, how they're interpreting them, how they're trying to meet them. So by all means, come and speak to us later at the booth to understand how we've seen your peers and other organisations interpret them. We've also got videos of software running, not demos of software, videos of software running, so you can see the kind of thing that will help your labelling and packaging teams ensure that they're doing the right thing to the products. And yeah, really, there's technology and tools out there that to do it without the right technologies and tools is going to be really, really, really hard, and I wouldn't envy you. With the right technology and tools, I think it still becomes a challenge, but at least it's one that you can step up to meet. That was it, really. I'm conscious we've run out of time. Hopefully that was of interest. Any questions before we close? No? Good. Excellent. In that case, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.